Every single conversation about China's rise is having the wrong argument. We're all watching for the moment China overtakes us, the moment it becomes number one. But what if that moment already happened and nobody noticed? Think about the last time you took a painkiller, ibuprofen, Tylenol, something simple. There is a very real chance the active ingredient in that pill was made in China. If China stops shipping it tomorrow, your pharmacy runs out within weeks, not months, weeks. Now, does that scare you? It should, because that's not the worst one. That's just the one you can feel. Think about how you actually measure power. Most people don't, they just absorb it. And what they're absorbing is a very specific idea that power is something you can rank. GDP, military spending, who has more aircraft carriers, who launches more satellites. It's a scoreboard, and we love scoreboards. They tell you who's winning. But here's the problem. The most powerful things in the world don't show up on scoreboards. Gravity doesn't show up on a scoreboard. You don't see it, you don't hear it, you just can't leave. So let me ask you something. Why does real power almost always feel invisible? Because the moment everyone can see it, the moment it's loud, aggressive, obvious, it's already triggered a response. The whole world lines up against it. That's not power, that's a target. That's not a theory, that's exactly what China is building right now, quietly, and most of the people who are supposed to be watching aren't seeing it. Let's start with something simple, something everyone thinks they understand. Factories. Just move the factories, people say. Build them somewhere else. Problem solved. Try it. Actually try it. Don't write a policy paper. Try to move a factory. You can't just pick up a factory and put it somewhere else. A factory isn't a single building. It's an ecosystem. 10,000 suppliers feeding into each other. Logistics networks, power grids, chemical supply chains, all of it tuned to work together over decades. Moving a factory is like transplanting an entire forest. You can't just take the trees. This is what people call China plus one. Move some production to Vietnam, India, Mexico. Diversify, de-risk. It sounds logical. It's been failing for 10 years. Not because the strategy is wrong, because China isn't just a factory. It's the entire ecosystem. Every layer integrated, optimized, decades deep. Take the iPhone. Vietnam can assemble one, sure, but where do the components come from? The chips, the battery cells, the rare earth magnets. Trace it back far enough and almost every chain leads back to China. Apple has been trying to move production out of China for years. Some assembly has shifted to India, Vietnam, but some is the key word. The overwhelming majority still happens in China, not because Apple wants it there, because the alternatives don't exist yet. Building them will take a decade and cost billions, and while that clock is ticking, China isn't standing still. That's manufacturing gravity. You don't feel it pulling you just realize you can't leave. Now let's talk about the stuff that actually keeps you up at night, or should, rare earths. Not the mining. Everyone talks about the mining. The scary number is processing. China processes roughly 90% of the world's rare earth elements, and for the heaviest, most critical rare earths, the one you need for the most powerful magnets, China's share is closer to 95 or even 99%. These magnets go into fighter jets, missiles, electric vehicles, wind turbines. The United States was shipping its own domestically mined rare earths to China for processing until just a couple of years ago. America had the mines, it was still sending the dirt to Beijing. Building an alternative processing chain takes 10 to 15 years. No single country has the money or expertise to do it alone. Batteries. China controls 80% or more of the battery supply chain. In some critical materials, it's over 95%. Every electric vehicle, every grid-scale energy storage system, every laptop battery, the solar chains runs through China. Solar panels. China controls over 80% of global solar panel manufacturing, every single stage of it. The entire world's plan to transition off fossil fuels runs directly through Chinese factories. Pharmaceutical ingredients. This one is genuinely terrifying, and almost nobody talks about it. China controls roughly 80% of the global generic API supply chain, the active ingredients that go into the drugs you take every day: ibuprofen, antibiotics, penicillin. For some specific drugs, the United States depends on China for over 90% of its supply. For a few, it's 99%. Let that land for a second. All of this, the magnets, the batteries, the panels, the pills, none of it looked like power on the surface. It looks like trade. It looks normal. It looks like Tuesday. Countries that publicly oppose China, that sanction it, restrict its tech, are still completely dependent on these systems. You can hate Beijing all you want. Your fighter jets still need those magnets. Your hospitals still need those drugs. Your energy grid still needs those panels. Political opposition doesn't change the physics of supply chains. Sanctions. Everyone loves sanctions. They feel decisive. They feel like doing something. But sanctions are a blunt instrument designed for a specific kind of target: transactions, money moving across borders, specific individuals and companies. Sanctions work when the target is visible, when it's a single point you can cut. China studied what happened to Russia, watched very carefully what sanctions actually hit and what they didn't. So China has spent years quietly, systematically reducing its exposure to dollar-denominated financial systems, building alternative payment infrastructure, stockpiling critical minerals. This isn't paranoia. This is deliberate preparation. Sanctions hit transactions. They don't hit infrastructure that's already embedded. They don't hit systems where cutting the thread would hurt you as much as it hurts them. You don't sanction the air, you sanction the transaction. And China is trying very hard to become the air. Here's what Western governments are actually focused on: GDP growth numbers, military budgets, tech export bans, blocking Chinese companies from acquiring specific firms. All visible, all headline friendly, all measurable on a scoreboard. But think about the logic for a second. Flip it. Real power is lost when others stop needing your permission. When does the United States have leverage over a country? When that country needs something only America can provide: access to the dollar, to American markets. So what happens when a country starts needing something only China can provide? Not wanting, needing. You don't negotiate with gravity, you work around it, or you don't move. The West is focused on the scoreboard. China is focused on becoming something you can't step off of. This is the part that makes China's strategy fundamentally different from anything the United States has ever built. America built an empire of allies: NATO, the G7, bilateral defense treaties, trade partnerships with conditions. And alliances are expensive. Allies complain. They demand concessions. They defect when it's convenient. An alliance is a relationship. Relationships require maintenance. They require reciprocity. China isn't building alliances. China is building dependencies. And here's the critical difference. Dependencies are silent. An ally can publicly criticize you and still be your ally, but a dependency doesn't care about your politics. It doesn't care what you say at a press conference. A dependency just sits there, quietly, structurally, unavoidably. Look at what's happening right now. Countries that criticize China loudly, imposing tariffs, restricting technology, are simultaneously expanding trade with it, quietly, because they have no choice. They're not hypocrites, they're trapped, and China knows it. You just need them to need you. And once the dependency is structural, woven into hospitals and power grids and defense supply chains, it doesn't matter what they think of you. So why doesn't China just act? Why doesn't it make a big move? Because acting is stupid. Think about it. The moment you act dramatically, the moment you make a move the whole world can see, you trigger a coalition. Everyone who feels threatened lines up together. And then it doesn't work. It just accelerates your opposition. China understands this, so it waits. And waiting is not passive. Waiting is a strategy. Every year that passes, China's position gets stronger. Every new dependency that gets locked in, every country that quietly starts routing more of its critical needs through Chinese infrastructure. Time is China's force multiplier. The longer this goes on without a war, without a visible moment, the harder it becomes to reverse. Because at some point, reversing it becomes more painful than accepting it. And visibility, being seen doing this, that can actually be a weakness. The quieter China operates, the less urgency there is to respond. So China moves slowly, deliberately, almost invisibly. Not because it's weak, because it's smart. So what does this actually look like? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, no war, no collapse, no dramatic announcement, no single moment where the world shifts, just adjustment. Countries quietly negotiating their priorities, governments realizing they don't have the leverage points they assumed, companies making decisions based not on politics but on what's available, what's real. But quietly, the architecture of the global system will have already shifted, not because China conquered anything, not because it won a war, but because enough of the world's critical systems run through Chinese infrastructure that changing course would cost more than staying on it. Power doesn't conquer territory. Power that doesn't conquer territory. Power that conditions behavior. That's not a superpower, that's something else entirely. And the scariest part, by the time most people realize what's happened, it'll already be done. So here's where I leave you. Is decoupling even possible anymore? Not in theory, actually possible given the depth of these dependencies? I genuinely don't know, and I don't think anyone does. But here's the worst question, the one nobody's actually asking. Everyone asks, is China going to overtake the United States? That's the wrong metric entirely. At what point does the competition become irrelevant? Because the system itself has already been restructured around a new center of gravity. Not by force, not by conquest, by quiet, structural, unavoidable necessity. And here's what that actually feels like from the inside. It feels like a politician choosing not to say something, a company quietly adjusting a contract, a government not pushing back on something it used to, not because anyone told them to stop, but because somewhere, at some level they can't articulate, they already know the cost of pushing. That's not a future we're racing toward. That might already be where we are.